Good morning and welcome. It's a Friday morning. Welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Ayo Makide.
Yes, indeed. The show has started before the show. Good morning and welcome to Sunrise Daily on Channels Television. I am Bukola Samuel Wemimo.
Might just as well go there, right?
Right?
It made the news when I think it's one institute, I believe it will be under the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Agriculture, talking about, this institute is into research about leather, tanning services and all of that in Nigeria. And the next thing people see on the front pages of their papers, federal government to ban Pomo.
Honestly, the mothers are going to protest. And I just might join.
Of course, the opinion that government has on that is, look, let's develop this industry. Let's develop the leather industry in the country. So rather than go for the Louis Vuittons, the Gucci's, how about something that we can just tag fully made in Nigeria and develop it? But really, I mean, if you look at it, it makes a little bit of sense.
Does it really? And this is not because of my protest over my afang soup, devoid of pomo right now. But really, it's more, to ask some very critical questions here. What's the measure of demand and supply? The cattle, they're all in a procession throughout the year, permanently now. It's no longer a matter of climate change. Throughout much of the South, they've been moving further down south, and they're in all of the Southwest, as a matter of fact now. So what's the measure of demand and supply for the leather industry in the country? That's one. Must you necessarily ban pomo to create the measure of, is it demand now that you require to restore the tannerism industry? So there's I believe there's a good number of cows to meet the demand, for the restoration of tannerism in the country, such that you don't necessarily have to ban pomo. Nigerians don't care that it doesn't have a nutritional value. They just want their pomo in their pots of soup.
This guy, I don't know, he's a comedian, forever. He calls himself the president of the Pomo Republic. And of course, he's gone on Instagram and, But, to the real issues, I think as far back as 2014, this campaign has started by the same institute, leather and I think tannering industry in the country. That campaign has been on since about 2013, re-echoed again. In fact, in 2014, I think the issue raised was that of health, that the process of slaughtering the cows, taking out the meat and everything. People use chemicals, and and some of them, it's the chemicals that people use, that are used to take care of some things, on the body of the animals. Some even say that some of the, cows may have been ill or something, and consequently, and all of those issues continued from that point until now. I think one of the arguments that the federal government has put up about this, part of it came from Minister of, in 2019, the Minister of Agriculture at the time, saying that the livestock value chain in the country, giving data from the World Bank, that we have about 20 million cows or 20 million cattle in the country, and extrapolate the figures, it comes to something in the region of 30 trillion naira for the value chain, and we are not doing anything about it. Now, that is a fair argument, but one of the issues that I usually, contend with in my head is, how do we communicate these things? I mean, frontally attacking pomo is you're going to find a resistance, because some people who can't really feed on the real things, I mean, at least there's some semblance of something.
When you get to the market, you can buy more.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
Cook your meal.
Exactly. And, so to be saying that, it doesn't have nutritional value, well, they're going to tell you, let us be the judge of that. Okay.
And you're right on the money where the value chain is concerned. In those days, we used to see those leather sandals, manufactured in the north of the country. by the Hausas,
Yes.
and you used to come down south. But what value did Nigerians place on it? I don't practically see that product from the south anymore. So what value did we place on it? It could be one of our own relics or souvenirs, for those visiting the country and want to pick up something that represents Nigeria, but there's no value placed on it.
I think what's important here is while the argument of the federal government of Nigeria and all those who are, invested in this idea might have value, what's important here, if you ask me, would be how we communicate it to people. It's something that should be extrapolated over time. Let people have an understanding of the real issues. And, many may not even have heard of this institute. I don't clearly remember the name of the institute right now, Leather and Tannery Institute or something like that. So let people have an understanding of exactly what the intention is, what the plans are, so that the people can own the process and fight for it on your behalf as well. Many are not unaware of how much of a staple, if I can use the term, this is for many, many people across the length and breadth of the country, irrespective of crime, of tribe, gender, culture, or tradition. It is something that many people go with. So how do we communicate this? And several other initiatives of government, which are fantastic, by the way. I think that is what the issue is here. And we hope that that will be done well enough so that people can own the process for you and help the federal government man mama. We're right after now taking the papers. Please stay with us. Let's begin with the Daily Times newspaper this morning, and they begin, of course, with a hot topic, if you like, on the front page of the paper today, and it's concerning the ASUU strike that we've been talking about for a while. The angle this time is different, and it's coming from the federal government of Nigeria. Take a look at it on the front page of the Daily Times newspaper. Audited accounts. FG moves to deregister ASUU. Yes, that's what you have on this front page. And there are those who will wonder, hey, we're not hearing this for the first time. It's something we've heard like countless times down through the ages, always threatening to deregister or to ban or to stop or to proscribe ASUU. But hey, whether or not it's going to solve the problem, I guess we'll see. Look at the writers. A Splinter Group applies for fresh registration, says we're ready to commence lectures. Well, that's the lead of the paper this morning. And right under the picture, investment in security yielding good dividends. As ascribed to Buhari, woos more investors to Nigeria. Find the rest of that story on page 2 of the Daily Times newspaper this morning.
From the Daily Times newspapers, let's take a very quick look at the Guardian newspapers, and it shows a different path with this one from Ondo State, and it's captioned this way: State Police Akeredolu flays FG's refusal to allow Amotekun bear arms. Let's take a look at the riders. If Katsina can, Ondo will, governor insists. State police is inevitable, says Senate spokesman. Huriwa sacks National Assembly probe on president's refusal to grant Benue Southwest requests for arms. 2023, police ban use of Amotekun ESN for election campaigns. Now, the governor's position yesterday followed reactions or the emergence of certain video from the north of it's the security network in that state bearing arms, and the governor cried foul, saying if they can bear arms, why can't Amotekun bear arms? Because Amotekun is also faced with, gun-wielding, attackers. Well, I wouldn't call them insurgents now, in the forests of Ondo State.
It's a
so
valid
that
point.
emerged yesterday.
It's a valid argument, and I think it is something that is. But then look at that reaction of Huriwa also seeking National Assembly's probe on the president's refusal to grant Southwest states and Benue to bear arms.
Yeah.
I think one should really ask questions
about that.
Perhaps also to investigate or probe the legality or otherwise of all of these things. Because at the end of the day, hey, what's the job of government? Is to protect lives and property, right? And when we talk about government, which government? Which government? Be it federal, local, or state, that is government as far as the common man is concerned.
And Huriwa is, very timely in its reaction, because it's a constitutional matter. If the Constitution or the Firearms Act confers the powers on the president to approve the use of arms by any security agency, so why grant some security agencies the use of arms and not the other? So,
too many questions.
Borrowing from the statement of the Ondo governor yesterday, what is sauce for the goose should also be sauce for the gander. Well, that's it for the big story, but there are other stories that will interest you from the front page of the Guardian newspapers this morning. And this one is beneath the big picture on the front page of the Guardian, interrogating cost of undergraduate education in federal state universities. And you have the picture spread of a number of universities just beneath that headline. It's a good one in the light of the circumstances, and it will be interesting to see the outcomes of that. But they're not far-fetched. They're things that we can ask questions and find out on our own, but so many dimensions to the challenges of tertiary education in recent times. And with the threats to withdraw the registration of ASUU in the light of the circumstances, well, I guess we'll have that conversation shortly. And finally, from the front page of the Guardian newspapers this morning, there's this one just beneath the nameplate. NNPC, U.S. Corporation, Exim Bank seal deal on gas project. Will it bring down the cost of cooking gas? We'll find out, I guess, soon.
That's all a woman thinks about. The Nigerian News Direct is next, and what do you have on its front page? Guess what? This one is completely different. And look at it on the front page of the Nigerian News Direct. ASUU Guber election, INEC admits errors in results declared. Ascribed to exclusive.
Okay.
We're just going to have to wait for INEC's reaction, because it looks like it's only Nigerian News Direct that has the story. It looks like maybe, I don't know, justifies reasons for two conflicting BVAS reports. Justifies, and we will wait to see the details of that. You'll have on other pages of the paper today. Right under that picture, 2023 general elections, IGP charges political actors on campaigning within extant legal frameworks. All of that you find parked on the front page of the paper. And look at this one. MKO's wife, Professor Zainab Abiola, maid, arrested for assaulting female police officer. That story is on page 2. I think that's, I don't even know what word to use for that action. But since the federal government has said the police has said she's going to be charged to court, I'm going to wait until the matter is determined. Consequently, I arrest the Nigerian News Director this morning.
That's the way to go. Let's get the details first before we unleash our reactions. Okay, from the Nigerian News Direct, let's take a look at Leadership on Friday. Leadership on Friday leads with politics, and the big story is rendered this way: 5 days to campaign. FG Atiku set tone for political fireworks, and they've been coming in a flurry in recent times. Lai Mohammed accuses ex-VP of copying PMB's economic playbook. That's the first of the riders. You lied. Apologize to Nigerians. PDP flag bearer tells minister. Keep campaign within extant laws. IGP warns politicians. It's a page 4 read this morning, and of course you need all of the details to keep abreast of what's happening.
When the PDP says, according to this sub-headline, you lied, apologize to Nigerians, question is, did he accuse Nigerians or the ex-VP? So why apologize to Nigerians? I'm just asking questions.
The ex-VP is putting Nigerians first in all that he does.
I see. Okay.
That's the only explanation I can provide.
Okay.
All right. More stories from the front page of leadership newspapers this morning. In New York, that's just beside the big picture. In New York, PMB woos investors, says insecurity will end soon. That's, the fallout of the president's participation at the UN General Assembly. I guess the leadership is following up on that. And lastly, again, just also beneath that, again, electricity workers threaten to shut down national grid.
Who's listening?
Yeah, who's listening?
This Nigeria is next, and look at what you have on its front page. You saw the federal government says insecurity will end soon. It would seem like this is what's been happening. NAF jets bomb multiple terrorist enclaves, kills scores. That story is on page 5 of this Nigeria Today. Troops recover over 7,000 barrels of crude oil, others in 2 weeks. Well, should we say that's a good start? It's a good start. Expecting the other millions.
And following, that's, perhaps a follow-up to the intense scrutiny of that sector in recent times. So perhaps the scrutiny should continue. Perhaps we'll save more barrels of crude oil as a result. More
revelations better come out. Look at the second rider. Military closing in on terrorist financier Abubakar DHQ, says. Find the details of that on the front page. Right under the picture, strike. FG may withdraw ASUU's registration over failure to submit audited account. Next one, Information Minister Atiku Baker over alleged plagiarism of Buhari's economic blueprint. Story is on pages 8 and 9. And ASUU says will remain in PDP to fight for inclusivity, says Wike. And stories on page 6. The writer says, Bode George, Atiku's response to calls for chairman's resignation is heartening. Find the details of that on the inside pages of this Nigeria.
And from this Nigeria, let's turn our attention to the Daily Trust newspapers. Daily Trust newspapers leads with a story on the economy. Buhari to investors. Capital inflow, our major challenge. Categorize our stolen crude as blood oil. That's a statement attributed to the NNPC Limited CEO, Kyari. Nigeria needs help to tackle debt burden. That's according to Adeshino. And finally, from the riders, we have this one. Emefiele, interest rate will continue to rise. Well, yet again, the CBN will bite the bullet on a decision on how to strengthen the economy following another record high in inflation figures. And you find beneath that, 2023, IGP puts police commanders on alert, bars Amotekun, ESN, others from election campaigns. And that's it for that. And lastly, just a quick check on one more story from the front page of Daily Trust newspapers. Just beneath the nameplate, ASUU, NITSDA says IPPIS, UTAS fail integrity tests as reps summon SGF, AGF, others. Whose report do we believe?
The report, well, there is facts, there is truth, there is your opinion. Daily Independent this morning has this one talking about some of the stories you raised, actually. IGP, it's about 2023 general election. IGP orders arrest of Amotekun, Ibubagu, other operatives at campaigns, says quasi-security outfits have no role in electoral process. Find the details of that on the front page, continues on the inside pages. Like a response, you have this one right under the picture. Akeredolu vows to arm Amotekun against FG's directive. Says if Katsina operatives bear AK-47, Amotekun can't be exception. Don't forget that Governor Akeredolu is a former, I think, NBA chairman. He's a senior advocate of Nigeria. So I'm wondering how this is all, playing out. Well, let me just leave it there for the Daily Independent.
From the Daily Independent, let's do a quick check of the New Telegraph. The New Telegraph this morning leads with a story having to do with the elections. APC gives candidate, well, above that you see 2023, NPC rather, gives candidates September 29 deadline to sign peace accords. Yes, that's it. And the writers continue with that story with this one. Tasks politicians on issue-based campaigns. Fears low voter turnout may undermine elections' credibility. Otedola, Yayale, Ahmed, Agwai, Momo, Hassan join peace committee. IGP will collaborate with INEC for credible polls. You find that story on pages 3 and 4 of the New Telegraph newspaper. Well, what's the point of peace accords if politicians will only pay lip service to the peace accords? And if after the elections we find that it's characterized by violence, and all of that. But we hope that this time we'll be able to hold them to account to whatever peace accord that they sign, and indeed the campaigns will be issue-based. Let's go beneath the nameplates to do a check on some stories. You'll find this one beneath the nameplate. Tambuwa takes over from Fayemi as NGF chair. It's a page 30 read. ICPC raises the alarm over diversion of public funds. Debt, China not planning to take over Nigeria's assets. That's attributed to an envoy. And lastly, DHQ, Defense Headquarters, that's it. Terrorist chief executioner, others will face trial as troops arrest 17 oil thieves, dismantle illegal refineries. It's a page 7 and 8 read on Daily New Telegraph newspapers. That's New Telegraph this morning.
Nigerian Tribune has this one still talking about the Amotekun story. Akeredolu vows to arm Amotekun, fumes over Katsina arming its security outfits. Stories on page 2. The quote you have right there on the front page tells you the story. Governors BOT in new push to end PDP crisis. It's also there right on the front page, and so many other stories that you will find interesting. ASUU to appeal industrial court order today. That's ascribed to Falana. Well, more on that on the front page of the paper. Look at that one. The writer Afe Babalola knocks FG over court case. Stories on page 28. Find the details on the inside pages, and right under that picture you see there, Otedola, Yayale, Ahmed, Agwai, Momo join National Peace Committee. NPC to sign 2 peace pacts with presidential candidates before 2023 election. The story is on page 4 of the paper this morning. That's the Nigerian Tribune, and with that we wrap up a look at the papers this morning. We're back after now. Please stay with us.
Many university students and their parents woke up to an announcement that perhaps sounded like a routine in Nigeria's university system. The Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASUU, announcing a 4-week warning strike on February 14 this year. That initial warning strike is now over 7 months after the lecturers rolled over the action 3 times. And while the striking university lecturers continued to accuse the federal government of reneging on its agreement with the union, the government, on the other hand, continued to say it has made its best offer.
In January 9, 2020, we met with the president. And after a long discussion, he handed over our document to the Minister of Education and said, please implement this. It was not implemented.
Government has already made an offer. So if I am the minister and I know the offer that government made is probably the best that it can make.
The lecturers are on strike over unpaid earned allowances, university revitalization, as well as the operationalization of the University Transparency and Accountability System, UTAS, which is a payment platform designed by the lecturers. Negotiations started in 2017 with the Professor Babalanke Committee, which was later replaced by Professor Manali Committee in the year 2020. The inability of this committee to resolve the issues again led to the constitution of the Professor Briggs Committee in the year 2021. The Minister of State for Labour and Employment had, during one of his appearances on our program Politics Today, promised to go on his knees to beg the striking lecturers to put an end to the strike.
I can kneel down on air and beg them. It has come to that point. Let them go back to classes.
The failures of these efforts to resolve the impasse made ASUU declare an indefinite strike on August 29 this year, a decision that sparked multiple reactions, including the directive from President Muhammadu Buhari to the Minister of Education and his counterpart at the Ministry of Labour and Employment to end the strike within 2 weeks. Still unable to return the lecturers within that window of the presidential directive, the Ministry of Labour and Employment referred the matter to the Industrial Court. Students who are at the receiving end of this whole saga also took to the streets, blocking major highways and the Murtala Mohammed Airport in Lagos. After 3 adjournments, the National Industrial Court in Abuja on Wednesday, September 21, 2022, rules that the lecturers should suspend the strike as negotiation with the federal government is ongoing, a ruling that the leadership of ASUU has refused to comment on.
Well, thanks for staying with us. As you heard from that report, well, ASUU leadership has since commented, appearing on Politics Today and telling us that, look, at the end of the day, it's whatever their lawyers say, that they shall do. And of course, we have the privilege of interrogating that lawyer this morning, Mr. Femi Falana, the senior advocate of Nigeria. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
I promise you it's not an interrogation. It's
Thank
just... But you are an activist as well as a lawyer, so the cap fits quite fairly on you on this. First of all, to the issue of the court case, what's your reading of that judgment? I mean, definitely before a judgment can be proclaimed by the court, there have been evidences, presentations, and counter-presentations.
I have my worry about the decision, because I've had cause to warn over and over again that the industrial courts, the Industrial Arbitration Panel and the National Industrial Court should try as much as possible to promote reconciliation when matters of this nature are brought before them, instead of issuing orders, which in the past were disobeyed. Because we want our courts to be respected and their orders. But when workers go on strike and an order is made asking them to go back to work without addressing the problem that caused the strike, there are problems. Last year, the National Association of Resident Doctors went on strike. And because of the nature of their work, we were asked to intervene as their lawyers. Then we pleaded with the court. What should be done in the circumstance? The court ignored us and made an order, thou shalt go back to the hospitals. And what happened at the end of the day was that the doctors refused. Okay. We had to reach out to the Ministry of Labor. Incidentally, the Honorable Minister of Labor and Productivity is a medical doctor. Can we go outside the court and sort out this matter so that we can restore services in the public hospitals? That was what was done at the end of the day. In this instance, the chairman of the Pro-Chancellor have come out to say, this order will not help. The students have rejected the intervention of the court. ASUU has rejected the intervention of the court. But for us as lawyers, our duty is to advise our clients in line with the provisions of the law. And I have made it clear to the ASUU. Your choice is to file an appeal if you are dissatisfied. And they are indeed, the lecturers are dissatisfied. We are filing an appeal this month. It should have been filed yesterday. But unfortunately, we didn't get a certified true copy of the ruling that was circulated 2 days ago until about 3 p.m. yesterday. So we are filing an appeal against the ruling of the court, together with a motion for stay of execution. In other words, suspending the operation of the order until the appeal is determined.
Perhaps for clarity, Mr. Falana, what exactly is the order of the court? What people just have on the front pages of the papers and in the media is the court has said ASUU should go back. What exactly are perhaps a few fine details?
No, what
because we haven't seen this.
What happened is copy. What happened is this. Again, I have practiced in that court for quite some time. This is my 40th year of practicing in the National Industrial Court. And I can say without any fear of contradiction that my law firm handles more labor cases, than any other law firm in the country. This is the first time This is the first time in the history of that court that we have been told that the minister can refer a case to the National Industrial Court without going through the IAP. Because the NIC under the current labor law regime in Nigeria is an appellate chamber of the IAP. So it's an appellate court. It is only when individuals are sacked that you want to challenge your employer, or there are intra or inter-union disputes, that you approach the National Industrial Court. The government cannot without going through it, because there must be mediation, conciliation, and arbitration under the law.
So it was wrong ab initio to go to the industrial court.
Of course. Now we try to explain to the court, and the court said, no, Mr. Falan, we'll look at that later. It's not about that. It is before you can establish a legal right in a court. No, before you can ask for injunction, you must establish your legal right. You must prove to the court that I have a right to be protected. So if you are in the wrong court, what right are you asking the court to protect by way of injunction? So that's what happened in the case.
If the court, just a second, Bukola.
That's
So
what happened in the case.
if the court didn't agree with you at the time that it was not right to entertain the case in the first place, then who is supposed to reverse that error that you have?
No, that's the Court of Appeal. But at least we made clear to the court, we submitted no less than 6 cases where the same court has warned the minister consistently. You cannot come here without going through starting your case, without originating your case in the IAP, if it relates to trade disputes. The court so found that this is a trade dispute. The court found that there was no reference to the IAP. But the court, in its wisdom, decided to intervene. And the only way you can show your dissatisfaction is to approach the Court of Appeal, which ASUU has decided to do. And that's what is permitted by law. Yeah. So we can't take the law into our hands. I can't advise my client, disregard the court order, without following due process of law.
But if you're presenting this at the Court of Appeal as one of your arguments against the jurisdiction of that court to address the matter in the first place, what are your chances of a consideration by the higher court?
I cannot predict what the court will do. I can take over the work of the Court of Appeal. We're going to adduce arguments to convince the court that, and not just because of ASUU, so that in future, the minister will know the limits of his own powers. ASUU and other unions will know their rights under the law. And that is the essence of the appeal.
Let's look at the case on its merits, Senior Advocate. The story yesterday was that it was an overriding public interest that Justice Polycarp ruled, such that the students can't go back to school after having spent 7 months at home, and then the negotiations can't continue. What are your thoughts on that?
Unfortunately, for me, having attended schools in Nigeria, particularly university in Nigeria, I am sad that we are going through these avoidable strikes where students cannot predict when they are going to complete their courses. But how did we get to this level? And I've been involved in the negotiations between the government and ASUU since 1992. And the attitude of the government is not to address the problems that led to the strike. In 1992, under the Babangida military junta, the government was directed university authorities to chase out, eject ASUU members who were on strike. We had to go to court. The court stopped it. Secondly, the government turned teaching, going on strike in the universities, a treasonable offense. We had to rush to court to stop it. In 1996, predictably, the Sani Abacha junta proscribed ASUU. We rushed to court. And the court ruled, the Honorable Justice Ajakai, rightly, ASUU has not been banned. The activities of ASUU have been restricted to the campus. ASUU doesn't operate on the street. So, instead of addressing the problems, successive governments go around trying to destabilize ASUU. The Obasanjo regime, because of ASUU. No, Babangida also deliberately enacted a decree to take ASUU, another senior staff union, out of the Nigerian Labour Congress. The Obasanjo regime amended the Trade Union Act in 2005 to say, before you go on strike, you must have a plebiscite or an election. ASUU complies with that all the time. Before ASUU pronounces a strike, each of the campuses, the branches of ASUU, will conduct an election through their Congress. Should we go on strike or not? So they comply with it. The government is aware. But instead of addressing the problems, revitalization of the universities through adequate funding, improvement of the conditions of service of lecturers, so that our universities can compete. The government agreed. In 2009, an agreement was signed. We are going to spend 1.3 trillion to revitalize all public universities in Nigeria. We're also going to improve the conditions of service of university teachers. The Jonathan administration, since 2009, the Jonathan administration released 200 billion naira. The Buhari regime has released 50 billion. That's 250 billion out of 1.3 trillion. All the government says, oh, we have no money. But the same regime, this year alone, increased fuel subsidy from 443 billion to 4 trillion naira. And we are now being told that before the end of the year, that figure may metamorphose into 6.5 trillion. So where are you getting such money to fund waste and fraud? But when it comes to education, sorry, we have no money. I think these are the issues.
But Mr. Falano, it still doesn't, I think, address the question that caller asked. I am very sure that you have done that. Just a second. The worry is that students are tired. The lecturers themselves are tired. Federal government is flustered. The historical background that...
No, the government is not tired.
Okay.
Hence, this matter is not being addressed.
Okay, but now you...
It can be addressed today.
You gave a historical trajectory to this. Now, what exactly would be responsible for that position of government? I ask that because 1992 is about what, 30 years ago?
Yes, 30.
Now, the people who were in government at the time, be it civil servants or government officials, are not the same set of people.
No, some of them are back as politicians. Those who are in the military, they are back as politicians now. But you know, now, let me also tell you this. If the government listens to us, all these strikes are avoidable. In 1992, again...
Just a second. If you said just a while ago that the strike can be ended today.
Today.
The issues can be resolved today.
Today.
What are the issues to be resolved?
Okay. Now, in 1992, it's about funding. In 1992, they also convinced the government that we need to make employers of labor pay education tax, because those who are trained by the government, right, are employed by employers, including your organization. So it was agreed that there shall be 2% education tax. We were involved in drafting that law as lawyers of us. The government enacted a decree to that effect. The 2% tax has now been increased to 2.5% tax from the profit of every company. ASUU is asking the government. This money is not being well collected. If you go around the campuses today, the only capital projects you are likely to identify are funded by TED fund, established based on the advice of ASUU. But what is the latest now? We have just been told now that the TED fund is going to be constructing, going to be building offices, edifices in the zone. Before you know it, it will be to have an office in each of the states. For what purpose? It's an intervention fund. Money is collected. You are asked to distribute the money. So you want to be erecting offices. Very soon, it will be contract bazaar. So these are the issues. In 1992, it was also agreed that all the federal government properties abandoned in Lagos will be transferred to a fund. Again, for the revitalization of the universities. What has the government done since then? Is to sell these properties to private individuals. So in a as you are aware, you can get a property in Ikoyi today owned by the federal government for 50 million naira. Tomorrow you put it in the market for 1 billion naira. So this fund generated from the sale of such properties ought to have been transferred to a fund for revitalizing the universities. So these are the problems that the government have allowed to bottle up. If we now want to address this crisis, I think the government say, okay, go back to school, we'll discuss all these problems later. You know, the experience in the past is that once to call off a strike in Nigeria, that is the end of the matter. The government will go back to sleep. And to call a strike takes a lot of efforts. So, and that's why workers are always very reluctant to call off their strike unless you are direct. Because in the first, why did you go on strike? ASUU had 1 strikes. The government ignored them until they now said, you know, we have resolved all over the country to go on strike. It was at that stage the government now started, do we ban them? In fact, the latest I was reading this morning now is that the Registrar of Trade Unions says it's going to withdraw.
That's where I'm headed. So what impact will it have on ASUU's agitation? That decision by government, or the proposed decision by government?
No, I'm not sure the Registrar of Trade Unions has been well advised. Because he wrote a letter on the 7th of September. You know, the government, some people, hawks in government, ban ASUU. But we have to come out to say, ASUU cannot be banned. For these reasons, and that's, okay, what do we do? Let's go and look at their accounts. Okay, they haven't submitted their account. Okay, they wrote a letter on the 7th of September. You have 72 hours within which to submit your annual financial returns and audited accounts. And ASUU, of course, made the deadline. The registrar refused to collect. And when that was brought to my attention, I said, please go to the post office and send. Because under the law, once it is sent through the post office, it's deemed to have been submitted. Again, by speed post. Government, post office went to them to deliver. Said, no, we're not taking. But yesterday, I think with the intervention of the president of the Nigerian Labour Congress, Waba, the audited accounts were submitted. So the question of banning ASUU through that approach is already defeated. So this is where we are on that. But again, as I'm saying, it is possible. I think the only area the government says, we're ready to continue further negotiations. Because I think last Friday, before the president traveled out to the United Nations, to New York, he met with the pro-chancellors and indicated that the government was prepared to consult all stakeholders with a view to ending this crisis. And the leadership of the House of Reps is currently meeting all the stakeholders. I think they have another meeting today, to also address this problem. So once we can all speed up this process offending the strike, and it's possible.
And in the process of addressing the problems, one of the reports today is that NITDA is saying that ASUU's UTA has failed the test, the integrity test. Is it part of conducted by government? I think it's that agency, to be precise. And ASUU has been on our program many times to say that indeed their own payment platform passed the test. Is it part of
you see, again,
the evidence you're presenting in court?
Again, frankly speaking, these are issues that ought to have been submitted to the Industrial Arbitration Panel. Which of us is right? And you call experts to determine which of the platform will help the universities. But by the way, I'm sure you are aware that the government's own system, the IPPIs, it has just been revealed, I think by the NSA, that 45,000 cases of fraud have been discovered. And not only that, the man in charge of the accounts of the Federation, with the government platform, IPPIS, has been charged with the criminal diversion of 109 billion naira. So you can't say that platform is the best for the universities or the country. So the government will have to go back to the drawing table. And if you are saying the UTAs recommended by ASUU is not okay, let some experts, independent experts, make appropriate recommendations to you. But the government cannot sit down and say, embrace the one that allows fraud to be taken to the universities. I think this is the issue.
Okay.
The other one, the government is, we can't pay ASUU for being on strike. Again, I think it's important to make this point. If the strike is called off today, unlike other sectors of the economy, if the strike is called off today, ASUU will ensure that the syllabus for the year is covered. In other words, no student will miss a lecture, because they are going to have what you might call a crash program. No holidays, no weekends, lectures will be taken.
Okay. You raised
so
the
they
issue.
They are going to work. They are not saying pay us for services we're not going to render.
Even though they say that they have continued to work irrespective. Yes. But, you raised the issue of the Vice Chancellors the other time. And a question I had always asked, Mr. Falana, is, would this issue have gotten this bad, even as far as government, if the Vice Chancellors, who are supposed to be like the governors of their universities, did their jobs the way they ought?
You see, they are doing their work. Let me tell you what happened. This regime, in order to avoid the strike, this regime set up the Jubilee Committee, renegotiation committee, because the Babalaki Committee had renegotiated and made recommendations ignored by the government. So that was the previous regime. This regime set up the Jubilee Committee. That body made recommendations, were thrown overboard by the government. The government again set up the Biggs Committee, Professor Biggs Committee. That committee completed its assignment in July this year. ASUU was ready to sign. The government said, no, we're not going to sign. That's why we're in this mess. So, for me, the government can just simply pick up the Biggs Renegotiation Committee report today. Summon ASUU officials, can we sign? And then the strike is called off.
If the government is refusing to sign bills, reports of committees that they set up, do you see a conspiracy?
Well, I'm a lawyer. I deal with evidence. So I don't engage in speculations. But I'm just saying, the government should be persuaded by Nigerians.
Because I like to decrypt government. When we say government, it's so big and vague and ubiquitous.
No, it's not big. You have the Minister of Education in charge of the affairs of education. You have the National Universities Commission in charge of the universities. So there shouldn't be any problem.
So should we give government some credit when he says that, okay, besides the 23% increase and 35% increase proposed earlier, they are committing to even increasing that?
No, they have to, because we're talking of paying a professor 415,000 naira in Nigeria of today. And the government now said, oh, we're going to increase it by 60,000 naira. When in Nigeria, I know councillors that earn up to 1 million naira per month.
Well, Mr. Falano, that and several others we will step upon when we return from this break. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Well, Mr. Falana, there are many other issues to take you up on, but let me quickly ask this one. You know, there's the uncertainty of whether or not the federal government took ASUU to court or not. So who exactly took this case to court?
I want to believe that the government is embarrassed by the public reactions to the intervention of the National Industrial Court. Hence, the Minister of Labour, Dr. Chris Ngige, said, we didn't take ASUU to court, but he filed the referral on the 8th of September, signed by him. He signed the referral. So it was the Ministry of Labour that sued ASUU, that took ASUU to the National Industrial Court. That's the federal government.
Isn't it also interesting that, sorry, Bukola, that, you know, in the order, because we just received that one now, it's between the federal government of Nigeria and the Minister of Education. The Minister of Labour is not on the list.
No, again, that was one of the things I pointed out to the court, which was not addressed, that the minister listed 4 parties: the Minister of Labour, the Minister of Education, Attorney General of the Federation, and ASUU. But by the time the government filed an application in court, by some strange development, it now became 2 parties. And I told the court, under the law, nobody can alter the referral. And I gave a couple of cases to back up the submission. But I think conveniently, you know, the matter was not addressed in the ruling.
And the council that we hear representing the federal government is named as council to the federal government. So I really don't understand.
Yes. Yes, of course. As the council to the federal government,
so if it's not the federal government that sued ASUU to court, the council will be representing somebody else. No.
I mean, the minister was just, I think he was a bit embarrassed. Hence he said that. My learned friend, Mr. Igwe SAN, who represented the federal government, never hid. I mean, you can't just go to court and say you are not representing a party. The federal government went to court, to be honest.
Well, you referenced in your earlier conversations about how the federal government should have raised funds to meet some of ASUU's demands some way. Yes. You referenced the oil sector, and you talked about, you know, the fuel subsidy and all of that. So I'm wondering, well, perhaps to speak first to the issue of the fuel subsidy, exactly where do you think that is even going? At a time when just a few, I think about a month or 2 ago, the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning was saying that our debt service, to service our debts, we had to borrow money to service our debts.
Even to pay salaries.
We're not talking about paying the loan itself. To service the loan.
Of course.
We borrow to service the loan.
Yes.
Not even to pay the loan.
Yes.
So where are we going? And now we're talking about an increment to fuel subsidy?
Again, the leakage in the economy through the fraudulent fuel subsidy regime can end today. On the 8th of August, 2018, the Federal Executive Council approved the sum of 17 billion naira to acquire a software to monitor and track all vessels loading fuel in Nigeria, crude oil in Nigeria. taking them to wherever in the world. And the same software is to monitor and track all trucks or tankers loading fuel in any part of Nigeria and taking them to wherever. After that meeting, the then Minister of State in the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, Dr. Ibe Kachukwu, announced to the entire nation, we are stopping this monumental fraud once and for all. We are going to acquire the software. It was announced. When I discovered a year later that the money had gone elsewhere.
So the money was released?
Yes, but not spent for the purpose. I wrote a petition to...
Not spent for the purpose,
yes,
purchase of the tracker.
The software was not acquired. So I wrote a petition to the FCC. This is a case of serious economic crime. No reply. I've just renewed the petition now under the new management of the EFCC. And I got a letter thanking me for my advice. I said, no, I'm not giving advice. I want an investigation. Today, we are told we don't know how much oil is produced in Nigeria. No. The instrument in 2012, by the way, the Jonathan administration, after the protests of that year, set up a committee headed by Nuhu Ribadu. That committee recommended to government, you must acquire and install meters in each of our oil terminals. Up till now, the government has not acquired those meters for all the terminals, I think about 36 terminals. So, and that is why some people have said, this is a sabotage from within. So why did you not install the meters? To know the number of barrels of crude oil produced by Nigeria daily. Why did you not acquire the software to track the ships and the trucks taking fuel, taking crude oil out of Nigeria,
out of the country,
and distributing, fuel. So, but again, this is not my own language. The current Minister of State in the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, Mr. Timpre Silva, has said the fuel importation scam is a criminal enterprise. Those are his words. The Comptroller General of Customs has gone to the National Assembly to say this is fraud.
Speaking of...
the government can therefore install the meters, because today, our OPEC quota is 1.8 million barrels per day. We are currently producing 900,000 barrels because of oil theft. So the remaining 900,000 barrels at the current price of about $100, we are losing not less than $99 million a day. It cannot be accepted.
It is not only the Minister of State that considers it a fraud. Yesterday, Pengasan was speaking at the public hearing by the House of Reps. Let me read what the president of Pengasan said. I can authoritatively inform this committee that men of the Nigerian Army, the Navy, pay their superiors to be posted to Niger Delta, yes, even when the former commander of the amphibious brigade in Port Harcourt was removed. Many of the men in the command resisted being posted out due to the lucrativeness of their operational bases. Are we alarmed as we should be about this revelation?
No, I'm not alarmed because I know it's been on for some years. I'm not alarmed. I'm only alarmed that the government has failed or refused to stop the criminal enterprise.
So what then do you make of the hearing, the Senate hearing on this, that made this revelation?
Nothing will come out of it. Because this is not the first time they are conducting such hearing. A lot of these proceedings are meant to divert the attention of the public. It's not the business with profound respect. It's not the business of the National Assembly to really investigate these matters.
But it is
once a crime is committed, an economic crime,
but the Senate
that is turning the country into a nation of beggars. You call the FCC, you call the ICPC, you call the police. Can you, gentlemen, can you jointly get to the root of this criminality?
What is disturbing there, Mr. Falana, is it's not the first time, by the way, that the Pengassan president would come out in the open.
Of course.
To talk about the military, the entire apparatus of the military being culpable in this matter. Is that to say we are helpless? Who then is supposed to take that on?
No serious state can be said to be helpless. In this age and time, you know, it's like security. You can sit down in your office using drones and satellite dishes to monitor all criminal activities in the country. So I get worried when people, there are some terrorists in the bush or terrorists in the forest. I beg your pardon. This is a modern situation. So if you have not installed CCTV cameras in your city, you have not installed proper technology, you can't combat insecurity. The same thing I have given you information. You must now ask them. The Petroleum Equalization Fund was to have hosted the software. 17 billion was collected. So the question of anybody stealing oil will not have occurred. The question of some criminal elements smuggling fuel across the border will not have occurred because you can monitor every truck. You can monitor and track every ship. Now, there is a company on Lagos-Ibadan Road, 40. I won't mention the name. I persuaded the managing director, go to the NNPC Abuja. Because he convinced me. And I went there and I saw the equipment that can track pipelines, all the pipelines, oil pipelines in the country. But they are not interested. So now you are now awarded a contract of billions of naira to a non-state actor who will now be giving weapons to monitor pipelines. It's crude. It's primitive in this age and time. So these are the problems. So the equipment is in the country to monitor oil pipelines. The software, money was allocated to acquire the software to monitor movement of crude oil and fuel. But the government has not done so. The other one that will interest you, and I've said this publicly, between January 2011 and December 2014, the oil that left Nigeria, crude oil that left Nigeria, and discharged in one port in America, Philadelphia port. The difference between what was recorded here and what was recorded in America was 60.2 million barrels of crude oil, valued at $12.7 billion. NIMASA had set up a team of lawyers to help track the fuel that was stolen from Nigeria. So this one, they were now to move and check other ports in America, in China, in the UK, in France, and in other countries that our oil was taken to. The government was not interested. A petition was submitted to the government, to the FCC. Nothing happened. I'm going to just advise now on what to do. So the shipping companies and oil companies involved are known.
To the government.
Oh, yes, to the government.
So you saying...
And because of frustration, that this matter was not taken up by the agency of the government set up to investigate financial and economic crime. The lawyers involved, a team of lawyers, led by my respected colleague, Professor Fabian Ajogo, had to rush to court to compel the indicted oil companies, powerful oil companies, to pay the government the value of what has been stolen from Nigeria. So the government has the information.
So are you saying that the Senate monitoring of oil installations, which should be going on about now, and the hearing conducted by the House of Representatives is just for the optics?
No, I say similar hearing. A lot of probes had been carried out in the past, and nothing came out of them. And nothing will come out of this one because it's not their business.
So if government knows this, as you said, is a criminal enterprise, I mean, you quoted...
The government, that's the language of the government.
So that's to say government knows the prime actors of this enterprise. Is that what you're saying?
That's what the government said. That's not my language. I'm using the language of the minister. But what I'm saying, science and technology have left the government behind.
Or that they chose...
Or the government has refused to acquire the necessary tools to prevent fraud. There is fraud.
Mr. Falano?
There's fraud in every country.
To whom was this $17 billion or $1 million that you talked about for the software? To whom was it released?
Ministry of Petroleum Resources. And the software was to be warehoused by the Petroleum Equalization Fund.
You have also said something significant, that, the award of contracts to a former Niger Delta warlord, to monitor pipelines is crude. Why would government choose that over the tracker?
You should be asking the government. But I've just told you there is a company that can sell to the government the equipment to monitor the entire pipelines. And Nigeria is the only oil-producing country, by the way. But Nigeria is the only oil-producing country that has refused to acquire the meter to monitor how much crude is produced. Deliberately.
There are those who would also point, Mr. Falano, to leadership. The question around this is a little befuddling for me, because you've cited this enterprise, as you quoted the minister saying, dating back as far as 2012. So it has traversed one government after the other up until this moment that we're in. So then, is it a problem of leadership or that of bureaucracy or politics?
Like President Obasanjo, the current president and commander-in-chief of the armed forces, Alhaji Buhari, is a minister of petroleum resources. So the ball stops on his table. So I want to believe that the regime will address this problem. Now that top officials of the government are coming out of frustration to expose the institutionalized fraud in the production of crude oil, in the supply of crude oil, and importation of fuel into the country. Okay. And the alleged smuggling to neighboring countries.
Okay.
So I want to believe that with this information oozing out of government quarters, that we may be getting to the root of the matter.
Just one more thing, Mr. Falano. Look at the legal frameworks or instruments that is preparing us for the 2023 elections across board. The Electoral Act, the Constitution, and several others like that. What, for you, are the crucial issues that the laws and agencies must be funded and strengthened to champion in order for us to have a free, fair, credible election in 2023?
In fairness to this regime, the fund earmarked for conducting elections, in other words, the budget of INEC, the fund is released as and when required. So funding is not a problem. But the political will of the ruling class to conduct good elections in Nigeria is a problem. And right now, there are worries. And for me, as a lawyer, there's no country in the world where you don't have fraud with respect to election. You saw it in America when President Trump called up people, electoral officials in Georgia, to rig elections. And when he didn't win the election, he instigated litigation, about 62 cases. But again, unlike here, between November when the election was held and January when you were going to have the inauguration of the president, all the cases were heard and dismissed by the courts. In spite of that, President Trump staged a coup on the 6th of January before the inauguration on the 20th. But for the fact that the institutions in America were strong, the coup will have succeeded. So, and that is what, for me, our people must be vigilant. And so far, civil society organizations, credible voices in the society are monitoring the process. But what is important for us is for INEC to bear its true name, Independent National Electoral Commission, and not allow politicians.
Anything compromising that independence?
There are threats by politicians. And all the officials of INEC involved in such compromise and sabotage must be kicked out of the system. I mean, for instance, the case of Senator Lawan and Machina, in spite of the fact that INEC said in its report, somebody did not take part in the primary. An official of INEC went to court to swear to a false affidavit. In Akwa Ibom, again, arising from the crisis around the emergence of Senator Akpabio, the police recommended that a top official of the ruling party in that state be charged for fraud, for forgery. Nothing has happened. In Ekiti, in Osun State, those who were selling and buying votes, many of them were arrested. Nobody has been charged with any offense. In Osun now, very disturbingly, the INEC gave a report to one of the parties, Beaver's report, specifically to the APC. An election petition was filed. Only for INEC to now go to court and say, we made a mistake. We hadn't synchronized the Beaver's report we gave you. So if such violations of the law continue, we're going to be in trouble. And that is what I mean by saying the INEC chairman in particular must insist on working with staff that are committed to transparent elections. And those who commit electoral offenses, either as staff or politicians or members of the public, will have to be prosecuted.
Mr. Falana, you've just started another topic, but we are out of time.
Honestly. Thank you.
We have to thank you very much for being a part of our conversation this morning. Femi Falana is a senior advocate of Nigeria. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Well, we're back after now to talk a little more about that in another way altogether. Please stay with us.
Yes, indeed. Welcome back to Sunrise Daily on Channels Television. And you just heard former Head of State, General Abdulsalami Abubakar, talking about the introduction of another peace accord to commit politicians to ranker-free campaigns. But Mr. Falana may have set the tone for this next segment of our discussion, which will be focusing, amongst other things, on peace accords, decorum during elections, and also on the expectations of beavers. That's where we're going to start off this time around as we welcome our next guest to this segment. He is legal practitioner, Mr. Emmanuel Imeribe. Mr. Matthias Imeribe, you're welcome to Sunrise Daily. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
My pleasure.
Let's start with, you know, the outcome of one of today's reports from the Independent National Electoral Commission, talking about two conflicting beavers reports from the Osun and Ekiti elections. What do you see to be the implication of this position by the Commission?
Thank you very much. For me, it is a sign of danger for the 2023 general election. It's a sign that tends to give an impression that INEC is not yet ready with respect to the electronic form of election which the current Electoral Act has subscribed to. Now, if that were to be the case, the import is that the 2023 election is in jeopardy because the whole essence of the 2022 Electoral Act is to checkmate the rigging process that had been the order of the day in the previous election. Now we intend to get it right. But if this kind of report is coming up from the same body, it's worrisome. And it's a worrying sign that the 2023 general election is in danger. And that is, for me, why I said that, look, it is not enough to have a good law. If the enforcers, or better still, the operators of that law have fraudulent mindset, it has the tendency of destroying the entire thing.
So does it touch on the integrity of the beavers or the integrity of the Commission? Because
for me,
we understand how the beavers works. It captures the biometrics, the personal information of the voter. So does it touch on the integrity of the beavers or of the Commission?
Well, let me say something. The beavers was a product of the independent body itself. Meaning that it was human that brought it about, as the case may be. Now, if today, as it stands, they are beginning to raise issues by themselves in what they themselves have placed what you may call confidence in, then what then do we as outsiders, how do we want to see them and in respect of the beavers itself? So, for me, I will not begin to talk about, after all, the beavers is a machine operated by human. So if there's going to be anybody I'm going to look up to for purposes of whether there's a fault or problem, it is the person or the personalities that are operating that particular machine. So if you have the wrong set of personalities, perhaps if they don't have experts or those who know how to operate the beavers operating same, it could be the problem. I'm meaning that it is the persons that are the problem and not the machine itself that is the problem.
Well, perhaps to explore that for a little bit, Mr. Meriwe, I remember some weeks ago, Yaga Africa, after some time, also flagged, the same report, even before this, conversation by INEC, began to come out that, look, they're checking through their records and all, initially had said, I think sometime in July, had said, no, it was consistent. And then out of the blues, I think in September, was like, look, we're not very sure how this thing is going like that. Some data are inconsistent. So in that light, is that to fault the entire process, or perhaps to put it better, what segment of the election would you now want us or suggest to INEC, to us, to pay a little more attention to? Because it would seem the conduct of the election itself seems okay until a particular point.
Now you know that election is even a process. It's not just simply on the day the election was conducted. Now, but that particular day when the election is going on is so crucial and important that if it is not gotten right, the entire process leading to that particular day will be of no moment. Now, for me, if on that day, the use of, because for you to make use of beavers, that is machine or electronic instruments of that nature, it must have gone through a lot of tests so that you now know the margin of error and know what and what to look out for. Now, if all of these things have not been done, that is why I said I place the blame on the doorstep of those operating the machine itself. So meaning that INEC too must look inward to know those they are deploying to handle those machines. Because if they end up having those who have partisan interests, because in most cases, why you find these things malfunctioning at times may not be unconnected with where there are vested interests in trying to manipulate the machine to suit a particular purpose. And when they fail, the implication is that the entire system is affected. So, but if you have a straightforward mindset, even if you have what you may call, you say, okay, I want to do some, but because you say, no, the intention is that let us get it right, you probably will see it work. There will be no problem.
And just to follow up on that,
Yeah.
is INEC trying to say that this would have an impact on the outcome of the results of the Osun and Ekiti election already declared? Is that what INEC is trying to say?
If you know, but for all intents and purposes, because if the Vivas has a problem, by virtue of the current Electoral Act, you know, if it were before, reference is to the manual accreditation. But today, reference is to that BVAS. That is, accreditation is by BVAS now. It's no longer the manual type. Before, the manual type is that when you come, they will check you, they tick. But this one is not an issue of whether they will check and tick. And even if it doesn't work, what do you have? You have the incident form. Today, the incident form is no longer there, so to say. Now, for me, like I said, it's a dangerous signal, so to speak. But I want to believe that the normal thing for the court, particularly the tribunal, in dealing with matters of this nature is to find out whether those errors are substantial to put or to nullify the entire election. If it is, we have no choice. The entire election will be nullified. Yes.
Okay. Well, Mr. Merive, how do you think this plays on the mind of the voter?
You know, that, again, is a fundamental question. And I would simply tell you that when a system begins to show signs of failure, what it does is to do what? To kill the confidence and the trust that the voters have in that system. And when that happens, we even have the worst case of voter what? Apathy. We've been complaining that people have not been coming to vote. The reason is not unconnected with the fact that people don't have confidence in the system. So when you now have a situation where that same system begin to frustrate those who have intention of coming out to demonstrate that they want to change the narrative, the implication is that it's not a good omen. So to that extent, the position is that if the government itself must do more than enough to make sure that the people in question, talking about the voters, come out. Because, look, if we have, let's say, last time, in talking about the current government itself, you have over how many voters? About 84 million people that registered to vote. But it's about 30 million that voted eventually. When I say 30 million, when you count the vote of those who lost and the ones who, and the one that won, if you put them all together, it's about 30 million And for all intent, that is not a good sign that people, that you are now having just 30 million out of 84 coming to make somebody to be the president of the entire 200 and something million people.
And now we have about 96
So it means
million.
that legitimacy is a problem. And perhaps that could even be why we are probably having unrest virtually everywhere in Nigeria, as it were. So if you have enough, that is to say, if you have more than that number coming out to vote, let's say almost half or more than half of the number coming out, then you now know that, yes, legitimacy will be placed on the government. People will be willing and be ready to volunteer. There's nothing like where you have a situation where people are not asking you to bring money. On my own, I can take care of this site and I will do it and do it well. But when you have a situation where you have people coming in, every time people are asking you, for me to do this, you must mobilize me to do it. And it's not good for us.
Okay, but so now that this is out,
yes,
and still speaking to beavers that Bukola raised, what must INEC do now to instill confidence, or rather to retain confidence in the beavers?
Well, the ball is on the, should I say, is on INEC's court, as it were, to come out to give what you may call a reassuring message to the Nigerians. Unfortunately, I don't think there's any major election, just like the state election that we except probably maybe there may be Senate or House of Reps election, which probably, because it's not everybody that will be so interested in knowing what transpired there. The Ekiti and Osun election is a typical example of an election that people want to see and say, there's confidence in the electoral process. But if we are having this report, with all due respect, it is a bad omen. My take is that the chairman of the Electoral Commission must come out and come out clean to now tell us that, look, if ABC is the position, because unfortunately, because it's already a matter that is in court, and therefore, it is not expected that he will come out to begin to make any comment concerning it so that it will not affect the outcome of the court process, so to speak. But I would want to believe that even without necessity of making reference to what is in court, what they have should give them confidence that we have the best. Whatever you find coming out from whether it is Ekiti or whether it is Osun has nothing to do with our preparation to give you the best in 2023. And I can assure you that with what we have on ground, with the experts we have and so on and so forth, perhaps, at most, call some experts to check the end product so that we know that this thing cannot repeat, so that they themselves will come out with their own report aligning with what INEC has. Well, so it cannot be an all INEC affair, so to say. Let a third party, equally who is independent, go and look at the process, look at the machine, look at the beavers, and then come out with a position to the effect that, we believe that this, the process will work out fine.
So in reposing confidence in the electoral process, does it make you confident in the electoral process when you see that the name of the former governor of Akwa Ibom State and Senator Godswill Akpabio has been uploaded in INEC's portal, and INEC has indeed recognized him as the candidate following that court judgment?
If the electoral process is right, nobody will be afraid of anybody being on the ballot, because you can be sure that the people will decide who they want. And for sure, it is the people's vote that will count. But because in the past, let me put it, in the past, we have a system where individuals could manipulate the mechanism for voting or for the election itself. I cannot fathom, using without prejudice to the governor of Imo State, so to speak, in respect of how he came into office in 2020. Just using 2 local government election results was all that he needed to upturn an entire state, if you understand the point I'm making. So if things like that happen, it doesn't give confidence. So, but if you have the best of an electionary, if the mechanism for voting is transparent and is put right, you can be sure that people will not bother because for sure the people's voice will speak. Doing an election wrongly is like committing a coup. It's as simple as that. When an election is not rightly done, it's a coup. In other words, you are having people that came in without the mandate of the people. And the tendency is that for them, they feel that they don't hold the people anything because they came in courtesy of their own words, individual effort, not the people's mandate.
Could INEC have appealed this court judgment? Because in its initial position before the court judgment, it had said that the only primary that it monitored was that of the other man, Ekwodum, in Akwa Ibom State. So could it have appealed this judgment?
Now, let me tell you, I'm aware that there are two cases concerning the Akwa Ibom, because you just took me there. Concerning the Akwa Ibom, senatorial, primaries. And I know that one is still in court. It has not been decided. The one that gave judgment in favor of Akpabio, the other party, who is the Udom, was not a party in that case. And that is where I have my worries concerning how this electoral process is going. Because I would have thought that naturally, even if, because from the conduct that was carried out, the primary that was carried out in Akwa Ibom, Udom was believed to be the one who won that particular primaries from that very senatorial, Now, and if that was the case, it happens that INEC, upon publishing the names, going by their guideline, and the names of these two parties were not published. But Akpabio felt that, look, my name ought to have been published. I'm the rightful person that is there. In going to court, it would be wrong that when they approached the High Court didn't bother to ask, that is to inquire, as to what would have necessitated INEC not putting, the other party not joining Udom in the case itself. So that it will be one case that will be decided, because it will look absurd that in the case that the subsequent one that will be coming up, Akpabio is there, Udom is there, and so on and so forth. Now, if you give judgment there, won't it be a conflict, depending on how the judgment goes? It probably will be a conflict over the one that came up first. So my take is that by the current Electoral Act, particularly Section 84:13, 14, that deals with parties going to court if they are not satisfied with complying with the Electoral Act, my take is that anybody approaching the court must disclose. The necessary parties must be there. The ground for any court assuming jurisdiction is where the necessary parties are made parties to that very case or suit. If the necessary parties are not there, that court does not have jurisdiction. So it will become a jurisdictional issue.
But isn't that something that I think, was it the NJC, or was it the Supreme Court that also already made it clear what electoral case could be heard where?
No, listen, what you have...
I'm trying to speak to what the issue you just mentioned now, about, who is joined in which case where. Yeah. So since that is already declared by the Supreme Court, I know the one you are talking about. You are talking of the case that happened, the Ogba's case. The recent judgment that was given by the Supreme Court. Yeah. In the Ogba case, that's the Ebonyi case, Ebonyi's case, where the Supreme Court said, no, Ogba was not a right because the appeal, it was not a party and therefore cannot validly bring an appeal in that very case. Yes. Now, that is why I said, for me, with the greatest respect, any case that appears to have been surreptitiously filed, that is secretly filed, even if a judgment is given in respect of that case, and bearing in mind that the necessary parties that ought to be in that case are not there, the court should not, there shouldn't be any this thing for the Court of Appeal to do or to strike it down. But at the end of the day, it's something that lawyers do. You are a lawyer. The common man is not going to take the case to the court without a lawyer. So some lawyers, your colleagues who are lawyers, know all of these things. They are the ones, like you heard Mr. Falano said, they are the ones that will advise their clients.
I agree. But the judge too has a very fundamental role to. Let me tell you.
There are certain things. Well, Mr. Meribe, just a second.
Right.
If it was the medical profession, there are no two ways about it.
Okay.
It's not. You can't put the heart on the leg. Okay. I mean, because no matter how expert a surgeon you are, you can't put the brain in the place of the heart. So, yes. But it would seem what lawyers want to do, argue the case.
That is why you have lawyers.
Exactly.
Always on the other
exactly.
Yes.
Consequently, the ones who will either address their client for or against the case, right or not.
But it still falls on the shoulder of the judge.
To ensure that the law is not turned on its head.
Listen, yes. It still falls on the shoulder of the judge.
Why take the case to court in the first place if you know it was wrong?
No, listen. No matter what, let me tell you, there's this principle in law that says ubi ius, ubi remedium. Where there's a wrong, there's what? A remedy. There's a presumption that if I'm wronged, I must have a remedy.
Okay.
And so the proper place to ventilate such will be the court. But the court has a duty to ask questions, because he must know the import of every judgment that he gives. That before I give this judgment, what is the effect? Then you now have to do what? Inquire and ask, is there any other party in this matter that is not part of this very thing? Let those who brought the matter now say no. So that you now know that person has come to deceive the court.
So my concern is, in this case now, where yes. the other party, Ekpodum, was not named in this suit, was not joined in this suit, the judge in question has full knowledge of the Electoral Act, I presume.
Yes.
And why didn't the judge act on the Electoral Act in determining the case?
The judge, let me tell you, even though I've not read fully that judgment, as it were, but my presumption, my thinking is that that judgment was premised upon the former Electoral Act in terms of decision that was given therein. Why do I say so? Because from what I read, the judge was of the opinion that INEC does not have power to reject. Are you getting it? Reject any candidate submitted to it by the political party after primaries. That was the position because that was the position then under the former Electoral Act. But if the court had adverted its mind seriously concerning the current Electoral Act, particularly with respect to Section 84, Sub 13 and 14 of the Electoral Act, the court will probably not have come to that conclusion.
So do you see an appeal?
Of course, there's no way this kind of matter cannot be appealed. Because one, the current state of the law couldn't have been referring us back to what you have in the past.
So
that would have defeated the essence of the Electoral Act that was just signed into law.
What effect then would this appeal and the other case that you said is in court, what effect do you think it will have on INEC's final list? Do you see a shuffle?
It depends on what the court will come up with, because asking me will now be preempting what the court will come up with in interpreting that provision.
Okay. I'm concerned. What does this do to the psyche of the voters? Because there are those who would say, we voted for Ekpodum in the election and not the senator whose name has now been published in INEC's website. So what does it do to the psyche of the voters, particularly ahead of the election?
First of all, let's get it right. The issue of the psyche of the voters, well, I don't think it was even in contemplation in the first instance during the primaries, because the primaries is done by a selected few. So it not depends on where the powers that be in that political party.
But it's a subset of the entire electoral process.
No, I agree.
The delegates are a form of voters.
Yes, that is a presumption. It's still a presumption, because you know how these things are done, where there was somebody who calls himself the alpha and omega, quote and unquote, of the political party, say, this is the person we want, or I want. And again, some of the delegates, if you recall what happened during the primaries of most of these major political parties, you see somebody openly, in some of the videos, openly distributing money to say, this is my share of what I got from this. Meaning that it is a purchased, the mindset was, the true personality in terms of his mind and conscience has been mortgaged. So he rather made use of the mindset of those who said he should be there. So would you not say that is representing the people? The answer is, of course, no.
Okay. Finally, let's wrap this up on this one. What would be your appeal to the voter? they will keep getting assurances from INEC that this is going to be the best one for us. So, to the voter, going by what you said about voter apathy the other time, in 30 seconds, what would you say?
The truth remains that we cannot lose hope. It's our country. We have no other country. We just must not lose hope. And I believe that as long as we are consistent and we are resilient, we will get it right.
Okay. Well, I guess that's it then.
Yes, indeed. And the conversation never ends. Of course, we want to thank you very much, Mr. Matthias, legal practitioner who joined us in our legal studio to look at the entire process, the beavers, and, of course, the court cases leading to the election coming up very soon, in a few months from now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
These messages, okay, sorry. This one is from Henry Okeke. Just a few of them before we say our goodbyes. Henry Okeke writes in this email, says, collective responsibility should be the watchword as we march towards 2023 general elections. It should be an intentional resolve by voters not to sell their votes, politicians not to buy votes, security agencies not interfering, an electoral body remaining neutral. Collective responsibility goes beyond deployment of technology. I like this.
Yeah, indeed. I like this one also from Festus Akimboyewa. He says the early intervention of the Peace Committee before campaign starts should be commended. As our political parties prepare for 2023 election campaign, they must put peace first and set out their vision to Nigerians in a way that will build peace and prevent conflict.
Kingsley Oshinawa says, FG is not serious on investment in education. Taking a body you have a valid agreement with to court just because you can't keep your side of the bargain is laughable. I'm sure they'll have done better if their children schooled in Nigerian public universities. Well,
that's our expectation. It's our hope that they do better.
And that's the show today. Thank you so much for watching, for allowing us to be a part of your morning. Have a wonderful rest of your day and a beautiful weekend. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Indeed. Enjoy your weekend. Thank you for watching. I am Bukola Samuel Wemimo.